What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Please do me a favor, take a moment, hit the like button for me, subscribe to my channel if you aren't already. Criticism in the comment section. As always, run over to Twitter. Shutdown Safety is my username. And, you know, as far as I know, I am the only commentator that ever worked with directly EA and Backbreaker. And to me, I've got a little bit more insight than most, because in Backbreaker, my name obviously appears in the credits, as does Apex's. I discussed changes that needed to be made in the game. I saw them implemented with the Great House patch, and then also I asked for some things to be changed that never were. So playing this game is kind of an emotional experience for me, knowing how much time I devoted into trying to make this the best product possible, and also seeing things not get corrected that really damaged how the community perceived this game. Number two, having been to EA on the other side of that coin, and, you know, giving them a similar laundry list of changes that needed to be made, and having that criticism actually better received with EA than with Backbreaker, but not seeing those changes implemented in the game is also just as difficult to deal with. But it's imperative we talk about this now, because 4 years later, I'm really starting to see some parallels between Madden 15 and Backbreaker, and to me that's very intriguing. We just sat through this diatribe from Rex Dixon where he talked about simulation football, authentic football, what you see on Sundays, and I wanted to go through step by step some things between Madden 15 and Backbreaker that I think are interesting and will make a great discussion. So the first thing that we're going to discuss here is physics. And Backbreaker really implemented and pushed physics into football games. It wasn't there before, and then Madden had a physics engine in the next game. I believe that was Madden 11. Now, the reason that's intriguing is, with Backbreaker, it's more than just a physics engine. It's actually players that have code in them to react as football players, which is not something we see out of Madden. This here is a great example. As 93 comes in to tackle 15, two things are going to happen here that are really special in terms of a football game. Number one, you see Pinkney's arm is starting to come back across the rear of the receiver. He's doing this because he's programmed, not with 50 calculations per second, mind you, but he's programmed to wrap players up when he tackles an offensive player. So you can almost even see here, with his right hand, he forms a fist and starts to pull this player back into him so that he can bring him down into the ground. I mean, you can see there, look at just the extension of and then the contraction of his arm, showing the fact that he's trying to pull this player back in. I mean, that is what football players do. Now, alternately, on the other side of that, you can see number 15, as the offensive ball carrier, is designed and programmed to protect the ball. So watch him now bring the ball in toward his chest, bring his other arm around to protect it, and try to push off the defender. You know, these are realistic interactions. These are not just players on a field hitting each other and colliding, but these are players reacting like football players. So when we talk about Madden and physics, to me, we still talk about a game way too governed by animation. I mean, here you have a situation where a kick returner doesn't even have a foot on the ground. You can see that a gunner is coming in, he's got his feet back, his chest up, he's low to the ground, and he's ready to come in and make an impact on this play. However, the game has this registered out as a stiff arm, and it does that because it starts to shift both the players into a better position where a stiff arm could be used. Because a stiff arm really isn't used in this position. You use a stiff arm when you have a player's weight and momentum up in the air and you can drive them back using it. You really can't use a stiff arm in this position because all the player's weight and momentum is actually more forward to you than your arm is. You just don't have the strength in order to achieve that. And that's why the player starts to get stood up the instant this stiff arm happens. Now, the other aspect of that is, you can see my linebacker, my tight end, number 86, he's going to come in. He has no interaction with this play. He basically just falls at the feet of the returner. The returner isn't willing to cover up the ball. Even though he's just executed a stiff arm, look at how far apart he has the ball from his chest. Johnson, the safety, is coming up from behind, could easily punch this ball out, but they just don't have these interactions. You know, Wilcox finally comes in, slides up underneath, but there's no tackle here. You know, these are just players that are hitting each other. Wilcox doesn't attempt to strip this ball. He doesn't attempt to wrap his arms around the returner. All you have here is bodies that just hit each other and fall down. And just to watch it at speed, you know, this to me isn't representing football in terms of physics-based gameplay. Now let's talk about players falling down during a play, after a play, and let's be honest, this happens in a lot of games. However, a lot of times you can have cutscenes that cover this, you can have it happen away from the tackle that ends the play to cover it, but it still happens, and it still looks bad when you go back and see it. Fluker here pushes D'Amico Ryans, and then Ryan spins around, but doesn't understand that Floyd is already there. So in addition to kind of running into Floyd on his own, he's actually pushed again by Fluker, who somehow loses his balance and falls into the ground. So as D'Amico Ryans falls off Malcolm Floyd, Connor Barwin comes in, apparently not having seen Fluker, runs directly into his lap, and then falls down and collapses on top of him. I mean, again, you know, these are things that impact the game when you see these, that make you question how realistic, how authentic, and how smart these players actually are. You know, and in all honesty, I'm not going to sit here and project that Backbreaker did a lot better of a job, but a lot of people took this clumsiness and lack of polish as really undeserved criticism or reasons not to play this game or reasons it was a bad game. And here you see a cornerback come in and tackle a running back. The lineman is going to end up falling over the running back. You're going to see a very late hit by number 23. And then here comes number 28 and 19 in the foreground. And what they're going to do is have an interaction where I personally believe number 28 is trying to get an unnecessary roughness call by throwing his hands up, while number 72, the lineman, comes into the situation extremely late, trying to pile on. And then essentially you're going to have a situation where 19, 28, and 70 all end up falling over this linebacker because they're just not aware of what's going on in the field. And keep in mind, at this point, Madden had a lot of cutscenes. There was a lot of polish to the game. People saw things like this and, in my opinion, just decided it wasn't a game that was worth playing to them because it looks so clumsy and unrealistic. So how would you perceive the on-field play to be? Alright, so the other thing to discuss here is injuries. And obviously, you know, injuries play a large part in football. They can really limit a team if they lose a key player. You can have that player need to step up off the special teams unit for a few weeks. So it creates something dynamic, interesting, and intriguing to keep you going. However, you know, Backbreaker did not want to implement injuries because they knew, you know, we have some ragdoll issues with players falling down. We want to only do injuries if we can do them in a realistic fashion. So this is a very realistic injury. This happens actually quite frequently in football. Tight end goes up, catches the pass, doesn't get it. Safety comes in, makes the hit anyway. And then you're going to see, kind of get tucked up underneath the safety, his cleat is going to get stuck in the ground back here. Now he's got all his body weight up on top of him, and he starts to land anyway. And this is, you know, a situation where you start to damage, you know, interior ligaments in your knee, hyperextend your knee. Pretty common thing to have happen. Now, as he falls to the ground, obviously with his knee buckled over to the side, Backbreaker didn't want to have this show up as an abdominal cramp, that he was out for the rest of the game, or a sprain where he was going to be out for 4 or 5 weeks. They wanted to have a more realistic, in-depth injury system, like we saw with All-Pro Football, where you could go back and see what happened on the field correlate to what happened to the player. Alright, so with Madden, injuries are in the game. So you get that realism factor where a player can go down, it can impact your team, but they're randomized. So whatever happens on the field really doesn't have any figure into what happens to the player. So you can lead your receivers right into safeties. There's no real risk and reward. Just all of a sudden the game decides it's time for this player to get hurt, and really, no matter what happens, even if he doesn't have contact, he's still going to be hurt. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's a fine line of which you would prefer to have or not have. So in a situation like this, I've got Darren McFadden, who's an injury-prone running back. He's going to try to juke in between Puzzlesny and Trufant and kind of get wrapped up into a cluster with not just the Jaguars, but also with Reese. And the problem is, during this interaction, you can see his right leg actually buckles right here, underneath of him, and then jumps back underneath. Obviously something that would clearly injure the player in real life. Now, in the game, this has zero effect on the player. But, however, if this had been a randomized injury play, it could have affected maybe Allen, the linebacker, not even involved in the play. So, to me, not realistic in the way they're just having injuries to have injuries. Alright, so let's close this out with the obvious. The camera angle. And Backbreaker got drugged through the mud for this at the time. I wish we could go back and look at all the negative things people had to say about this. And you know what? Some of it is justified. You know, number one, yeah, it is harder to play the game like this. It is more realistic. But there's also a lot of downfalls to this. You don't have the ability to interact in each and every play. You can't change players as seamlessly as you could in Madden, seeing the whole field, to make corrections to coverage, or pursuit, or to pressure a quarterback, to make a tackle. You're so dependent on what the AI is doing in the play because you're stuck in your one position. And listen, it's a video game. We're going to be smarter than that. We're going to want to make decisions the computer can't to correct things to make an impact. And it's difficult to do that consistently in this view. It really limits your interactions in the play, and to some people, that dissolves the fun of a video game. And let's be honest, EA did not create that camera angle. You know, that above the game camera angle was in just about every football game imaginable. And when you try to reinvent that, there's going to be some backfire. So in this play, we're just going to take a look at what happens. First of all, I have to correct my position to see what's on the field. I've already noticed that there's 2 defensive backs on a receiver on the right side of the field, but I can't see anything that's on the left in this I formation. So what I do is I back up a little bit, and then I'm watching the quarterback and number 40 kind of simultaneously. Once he goes back to his zone, I've already made the decision that I'm going to stay in this passing lane. You can see the line between me and the quarterback is almost a straight line. I'm looking directly at him, and I know if he's throwing the ball to this receiver on a slant, I'm going to have the ability to run in front of it and intercept it, while also knowing that number 30, the defensive back, is going to be in position to make the tackle should I miss. Now, the interesting thing is here, I stand here. And the play is actually designed for me to stand here. The reason it is because it's actually a play action. By the time I realize I've just now seen that running back has gotten the ball, I accelerate forward with a little bit of a delay because it's difficult to see, but the tackle's already been made. So to go back and watch this whole play, you can see my interactions in this were just about none. If you're playing this for fun, you're not enjoying what you're doing. So that's going to be a challenge I see with Madden. I'd love to know your guys' opinions on this. I appreciate you sitting through the video, and I'll be back in the week with more content.